Hello, welcome to Trans-Hermetica. I am Phaedra Charles. This is episode 1 in a series I'm doing where I will be reading the Book of Mormon, which is a scripture of the LDS Church, and I will be looking at that story and interpreting it through the lens of the Ching, which is a Chinese system of divination. So to get started, this last week I read the first 4 chapters of the Book of Nephi, which is the first book at the beginning of the Book of Mormon. And I'll just give a little summary of what happens in those chapters and what questions came up as I read that, and the reading, which I will share as well. So the book starts in, the setting is Jerusalem, and I believe it's somewhere around the year 600 BC. It starts with a family. The father in this family is, his name is Lehi, and it's established that he's a man of God, and he has a personal relationship with God, and he's a man of visions and dreams, and specifically a man who, as far as I can tell, this is implying that he is one who has mystical experiences. And he has a family with 4 sons, who are Laman, Lemuel, Sam, and Nephi. That's from oldest to youngest. And it starts with him. He has a dream that Jerusalem is destroyed because of all the inhabitants' sins and iniquities. This is a very common theme in the Bible, I think, of civilizations that kind of fall from, there's a fall because of pride, there's a fall because of, not listening to the prophets, not listening to God. So yeah, we're seeing this kind of echo. This is kind of like establishing that Lehi is, maybe somewhat of a prophet. He's prophesying that Jerusalem will fall. He shares this, he goes into the city and shares this with the inhabitants. Everyone basically just treats him like he's crazy, and I can't remember, I think they maybe even try to run him out of the city. And so he has another vision that he needs to take his family, he needs to leave Jerusalem, he needs to leave all of their possessions behind and only take their family and head out into the wilderness of the desert. The older brothers, Laman and Lemuel, are kind of hemming and hawing through this, what their father shared with them, and kind of basically align with the inhabitants of Jerusalem that are like, "You're crazy! Like, what do you mean we have to leave?" Nephi, the youngest sibling, sees that his father has a relationship with God, and instead of, choosing to express skepticism over what his father said, he instead kind of realizes that he needs to establish his own relationship with God for himself. And so he goes and does that, and it's very briefly, basically it's just, he does that, and because of that, he doesn't question his father's judgment or his dreams. So, the whole family goes out into the desert. I think Laman and Lemuel seem kind of like they're just kind of complaining the whole time. But they more or less seem to be going along with things. Out in the desert, Lehi has another vision where God tells him that he needs to send his sons back into Jerusalem to get these plates of brass from a man named Laban. And these plates of brass are supposedly basically like the Bible, written teachings that have been passed down, a document, a genealogy of different families up to the current the current time at that time. And I'm not sure why they didn't bring this to begin with, and who Laban is. It doesn't really explain what Laban's relationship is to this family, other than he's it seems like he's a wealthy man, and he has these plates My guess is maybe these are documents that it kind of represents a documentation that, the whole community has like a vested interest in. Maybe Laban has them because he's wealthier, doesn't have them for their intrinsic value, but more for their like material value or something. So anyway, so the sons go to Jerusalem. Their first attempt, they kind of make an audience with Laban. I can't remember if they just ask him for the plates or not, and I think he kicks them out or laughs at them maybe. The brothers are all kind of sitting outside the city, kind of like at a loss of like, what do we do? I think Laban and Lemuel are ready to throw in the towel. And Nephi's like, well, what if we left all this, all of our possessions, our gold and silver, we're not going to need this anymore. Maybe we can we can kind of do a trade with Laban to get, we can wow him with all this valuable stuff and see if we can get the plates. So they go back, they bring all of this, all their fine stuff that they don't need anymore. And Laban decides to not only keep the things they've brought, but also just kick them out and not agree to anything and just take their stuff and kick them out of the city, chase them out. And so, the brothers, make it out of the city by the skin of their teeth. The older brothers are furious at Nephi, like, this is such a harebrained idea. How could you do that? Like, this was never going to work. And they basically go to like, kind of like, beat their brother up. And an angel, I think Nephi, I don't know if Nephi like summons an angel or if an angel just appears and basically is like, don't beat your brother up. And, they're kind of just like taken aback. This is an angel that's just appeared out of nowhere. And they calm down. Nephi is like, okay, guys, you know what? I think I'm just going to go into the city and I'm going to trust that God is going to provide. God is telling me that I need to do this and that he's going to provide a way, and I'll just wing it as I go. And his brothers are just kind of like, okay, like, you can go do that. We're not going to come with you. Good luck. And so Nephi heads into the city at night, just kind of seeing what will happen, letting whatever opportunity presents itself kind of arise. And he gets to Laban's house, and Laban is passed out in front of the house in a drunken stupor by himself. And Nephi sees this and is basically like, okay, this is God. This is God doing his work and basically delivering Laban to me, and God is telling me that I need to kill him. And Nephi, it's very gruesome. Nephi then cuts Laban's head off and puts on his clothes and goes into Laban's house and takes the plates, recruits, I think it's like a servant of Laban or something, and the servant thinks Nephi is Laban. Nephi heads out of town. The brothers see what appears to be Laban approaching them, and they think that, Laban's killed their brother and is coming for them. So they're freaking out, and then Nephi's like, no, wait, it's just me. I'm just, takes off his hat, and, the servant's like, what? Like, you're not Laban? And they, basically calm him down or assuage him and talk him into coming with them into the desert. So that's basically how this, up to this point, I think that it's the moment where Nephi cuts Laban's head off. I'm reading this and I'm thinking, Nephi supposedly has a relationship with God, and God is telling him to kill this man. And not only kill this man, but also cut off his head. It seems a little gratuitous. Like, why cut off his head? Like, this is a very specific, like, very violent way to murder someone. he could have cut his throat. If he's trying to be sneaky, cutting a guy's head off is not like a subtle thing to be doing if you're worried about not getting caught. If I believed that God was telling me to kill someone in this horrible way, I guess that begs the question, like, is this God? Nephi says, or Nephi asks God, basically like, really? You want me to kill this guy? And God's like, yeah. And he says something like, God tells him, it's better for one person to die than for a whole nation to dwindle in unbelief. This is kind of like, it feels a little bit Machiavellian in the sense of like, you're sacrificing one person for the greater good of preserving the wisdom of like your ancestry or whatever. Yeah, and something about this rubs me the wrong way. Like, violence enacted in the will of God, can that ever be the way? Does violence just beget more suffering? Does violence just create more violence? I had this question when I consulted the Ching, and the hexagram that I drew was 51, which is QUAKE. So the judgment, I'm just going to read the judgment here. Fortune. The quake makes men tremble. It makes them laugh. The quake disturbs for 100 li, and li is just like a great distance. So this is a disturbance that's felt. That's kind of like, has very far-reaching effects. Neither ladle nor goblet is lost. On the judgment, fear brings blessing. Laughter brings discipline. The disturbance is felt far and near. Ritual vessels are not lost. He comes forth. He preserves the ancestral temples, the altars of earth and grain. He is master of the sacrifice. 1, ritual order is preserved. The vessels are kept safe. So, this seems to communicate some sort of material continuity of wisdom. Vessels, there's some sort of ritual and surrounding material objects that preserves this like connection to our past, or his past. Being able to access that is very important. Being able to understand our history is very important. This is a very visceral, violent thing that he did. And I see that as kind of being the shockwaves that this kind of sends out of like, if he had just like disabled the guy or just, he was already passed out, like he could have also just gone into his house and taken the plates since he was passed out. The quake is kind of like this is a very deliberate, like he's cutting the poison off at the head kind of a thing. That is something that kind of strikes, like, reading that, it's like, it's shocking. And then it also is followed by, reading this, there's laughter in a way that follows that, because it's almost absurd, that decision that he made. And also like dressing up and taking his clothes off and impersonating the guy. It reminds me of that scene in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker and Han Solo are, trying to make their way into the Death Star, and they basically, they mug some stormtroopers and put on their garb and go into the Death Star. And it's kind of like, it's funny because it's like they're putting on the face of their enemy to achieve, their own goal and their own, like, what their higher self is kind of directing them towards. Some other thoughts that came from reading this text: the way of the world can be used to cultivate the Tao. So Nephi, he's kind of like, they've done everything they can up to this point to try to like properly get the plates from Laban, and basically the guy is not budging at all. And so instead, Nephi kind of chooses to just like literally just show up for whatever happens and just listen to the situation, listen to that. And so in a way, that's, that is Tao, and that's like movement that he's cultivating. And another section that really stood out to me was, so this kind of doubting of like when you see someone making a decision like this, from the outside, it's like, wow, this is a very violent thing this person is doing. Is that the way? Like, is this really going to make the situation better? What have you invited by doing that? And one of the statements in this analysis was, if inner movement is true, then outer movement will also be true. And so I think I kind of interpret this as when a person, I think if we look at Nephi's relationship to God, if we look at it from a psychological point of view, the path to self-actualization is very much about learning to discern the voice of our higher self and what that is directing us towards, and the decisions it's directing us towards. And sometimes the decisions we know we need to make for ourselves, from an outsider's perspective, could be very violent, could be very traumatizing, could be unnecessary. I think here the text is telling us that the Ching is saying, if that is the voice of God, of his higher self that's telling him to do this, and he's moving with his inner truth, the outer movement will also be true. So what happens around him will reflect whatever energy he's kind of attracting. That's going to be reflected on the outside as well. So time will tell how this will play out. Will he be held accountable for that? By who and why? This is an unfortunate decision that he had to make in order to preserve something that's going to be very important to his family and their future generations. So I think, looking at that from that perspective, it's less about trying to rationalize what he did and whether it was right or wrong. Because I think that, again, the way of the world can be used to cultivate the Tao. All of us make decisions that have effects that yield change. And the particulars of whether or not those things are right or wrong is ignoring the fact that cultivating this flow is what leads to really learning to trust your inner voice. And he's doing this. And, I think the fact is he did this thing that was very violent. He's going to ultimately be in that, whatever energy that cultivates, he's going to have to partake of that and deal with that. It's not really for us to say, from an outside perspective, whether or not what he did was right or wrong. I think it's, we can look at it just from the perspective, he did that. And it sent a shockwave through us. And it was kind of ridiculous, the way that he did that. But he did that. And, let's see how this plays out, I guess, more than anything. So yeah, I hope that, helps kind of gives a lens for how we can look at this very action-packed start to this book. And I'm interested to see where this story goes, how these things are going to ripple and affect other things that are moving forward, in terms of his relationship with his brothers and his relationship with his family. Thanks for tuning in. If you find this interesting, I hope you subscribe to my channel, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.